Hey guys, and welcome to a video I'm probably going to be calling the best personas of Persona 4 Golden. At least that's the tentative name for it, depends on what the algorithm likes the most. So recently I started playing Persona 4 Golden for the first time, and as I was doing some research on it, just, some research, and I noticed that there was a significant lack of good or recent Persona 4 Golden videos on making personas, what makes a good persona, and some good personas to make in Persona 4 Golden. There were some older videos, but very few of them have voiceovers, and very few of them go into depth. Today, I'm hoping to go over the basics, at least, of what makes a good persona in Persona 4 Golden. I'm going to show you guys some of the personas that I've made. I will include some footage of them, being used in battle, and at the end, I'll be fighting against the Reaper, solo, on hard, just to show off all the personas that I talk about in this video. So without further ado, let's just get into what makes a good persona in general. So in the early game to mid game, you're not going to really need to worry too much about which personas you're picking. You just need to keep using up the new ones that you can get. I would classify early game to about level 25-ish, 1 to 25-ish. And then, like, from 25 to about, I'd say, like, 70-ish? Like, early 70s is about mid-game. I know it's a huge chunk there, but I guess you could kind of classify... No, I think that's about right, because mid-game does take up quite a bit of time. And then, like, end game is right around the 75, 76 mark. That's when you start getting into like the levels where you can fuse like your final social link, like maxed out social link personas and stuff like that. And so today we're mostly going to be focusing on what makes a good endgame persona. I feel like, especially for Persona 4 Golden, you really don't need to worry too much about early game and mid game. I would say even like end game, at least the main story you can probably complete without worrying too much about what I'm going to talk about here today. Currently I'm in my first playthrough of Persona 4 and I've currently just beaten the culprit. I have an idea of what's to come, so some of this information may be slightly changed. Throughout this video, I will be referencing a Google document, which I will also be showing on screen at certain points to illustrate points. This is basically my party planner. That's what I use to plan out the personas that I will be showing on today's video. And you can use it to like follow along the steps that I used to make the personas that I'm using today, or as a reference to like make your own personas. Like maybe you like the layout of how it looks or whatever. I mean, it's a Google Doc, so it's not that fancy or anything, but at least you might get some use out of it, so that'll be down in the description for your use as well. So basically what you're going to want to look for in a good persona, and let's just change it over to the game. We're going to be in the Velvet Room for most of this video, besides the B-roll footage. So what you're going to want to look for in a good persona is you're going to want to, at least for endgame, you're going to want to look at what are their inherent weaknesses and resistances and their unique skills. So, by that aim, we can take a look at something like Arakabaki. Actually, Arakabaki has been severely nerfed since Persona 3, where he, I think, had at least not a weakness to anything in particular, and had a resistance to at least one of those. At least a couple more things. He was very easy to patch up, so you could get him pretty much invincible. When I'm talking about unique skills, I'm talking about skills that no other persona can learn. Here's a good example. Cert has his signature of Ragnarok, which deals severe fire damage to one foe as the ultimate single target fire attack for any persona. However, a lot of these unique skills cannot be passed down. And that is what makes unique skills worth looking at when you're looking at which personas you're going to make, as well as like how cool they look and everything. Because while you can put a lot of different skills onto a persona through fusion and through the skill card system, unique skills cannot be passed down, and they cannot be made into skill cards generally. And so it's hard. So that kind of like defines that in the model and look of the persona are really the most unmalleable things other than the resistances and weaknesses and everything. Weaknesses and resistances can be patched up by skills, but skills are skills. Stats also are a factor, but not the biggest factor to consider when looking at persona, because obviously the higher the stats, the better. But you can always like train up a persona to have really good stats that it wouldn't otherwise have. So I wouldn't worry too much about having stats. You can always buff personas like out the wazoo if you train hard enough. And you might be saying, well, how much? Like, how long does that take? So for that, let's go ahead and take a look at the first example in today's video. So today's first example is going to be Izanagi, and I'm just going to use him as an example to show you what you can do with any given persona. Izanagi is your starter persona, and he starts out at level 1. Now, as you can see, the Izanagi I have here in the compendium is level 57. I decided that, hey, it would be a fun thing to do to bring along this first starter persona all the way through the game, because I kind of knew the Persona 4 had like the skill card system, and I figured this could be something fun to do. It could be a fun challenge, because it takes up one of my slots. Like, it's not too much of a challenge, but it would be a fun thing to do to bring it towards the later bosses and to have Izanagi, especially as you can't get his superior form until New Game Plus. So that is the version that's currently in the compendium. I stopped registering him in the compendium because I realized it would just cost me more and more money to summon him like that. So this is what Izanagi currently looks like. He has currently been maxed out to level 99. Current skills are Maziodyne, Mekidolan, Brave Blade, Absorb Wind, Arms Master, Enduring Soul, Angelic Grace, and Evade Physical. I should note here that I'm likely going to start playing B-roll footage at some point here. This is a slightly different build than what you're seeing in the footage. He did not have Angelic Grace at the time. I got that actually while I was recording B-roll footage for this video. Is a very great moment. I believe I said Pog out loud, and my brother texted me what I was yelling about in the other room. So that was very cool. Angelic Grace, for those of you who don't know, doubles evasion rate against all attacks besides Light, Darkness, and Almighty, which is great. It's very useful. You can slap that on pretty much any persona, and it's just a good skill to have. And it also is a skill that you can only get the skill card of from the Ultimate Social Link persona of, I believe, I want to say Nanako. Yes, I believe that is right. So getting it here means that I don't have to take up time at Chagall Cafe, and it means I didn't have to wait to max out Nanako's Social Link to actually get that skill card. That was very cool. You can also see on him Arms Master. That was from, I want to say, yeah, I believe that's no, that's not Yoshitsune. That is another one of the party members I have currently. I think it's Futsunushi that gives that? Yeah. But anyway, I just want to show that, like, you can take this persona that originally has some very low base stats, and you can crank up his stats all the way up. With the armor I'm currently wearing, which is the best armor in the game, it will max out his stats all the way to the maximum. So yeah, he's only missing a few points from 1 point of luck, a few points of magic, and a few points of agility to be inherently maxed out on all of his stats. And his weakness has been covered there, as you can see, to Wind by Absorb Wind from Horus. So as you can see, you can take pretty much any persona if you like them enough and make them at least decent. This one is kind of a mess, and you'll see that, and I'll talk about some of these builds aren't finished. I'm still kind of, like I said, I'm not finished with my playthrough. I'm through the main game content. Now I'm in the post-game golden content, pretty much. So I'll be kind of hammering out my team a bit more, and if I do end up making changes or settling on different builds, slightly different builds, they should stay mostly the same with maybe some adjustments here or there, depending on how they play out. That will be reflected in the doc, so that should be useful for you guys. as well as any other personas that I might make after this. Skipping over Daisoujou for a moment, let's talk about Trumpeter for a sec, because Trumpeter highlights another aspect of persona creation and party planning that I'd like to bring up at this point. Make sure you know what role your persona is going to fill. For example, Trumpeter here is going to fulfill our buffing role and our setup role, and I'll show you that in a sec. Just one sec here. Let me pull up in. And it's really important to emphasize how important buffs are in the SMT and Persona games. I know you might have ignored them in Pokemon, but for real hard game content, well, you're not going to find too much of that in Persona 4 Golden. But if you ever plan on playing a mainline SMT game, just know that you're probably going to need to worry about buffs and debuffs. Especially if you're going to play Nocturne, which is primarily focused around using buffs and debuffs. So let's go ahead and take a look at the skills on this Trumpeter. He's got Autumn Tarukaja. Again, I don't know if I've said this yet, but please forgive me if I mispronounce skills. Listen, they're written down. I haven't ever heard them said out loud, so there's no way for me to really know what they're supposed to be. And you know what? It's made-up skills being used by made-up demons, so who cares? Automatic Marukaja at the start of battle, and Auto Masukaja at the start of battle. So, what these do is they apply a buff to agility, or like evasion and hit rate, however you want to say it. It's basically agility. Attack and defense to your whole party at the beginning of the battle for 3 turns. This is mostly sufficient. Honestly, you could probably... I want to say you could probably replace one of these or Megidolon with Heat Riser. The reason why I didn't, and let's get into this now, because Trumpeter is a great example of a persona with a lot of resistances to things, and people like to use him a lot for that. So he has a natural resistance to 4 elements, which leaves 3 besides Almighty, which can't be blocked or really resisted by the player, to be blocked, and he will be pretty much invincible. You will probably be seeing that in the footage right now, or as the footage continues, him just constantly tanking shots or reflecting shots back at the enemies. I believe there's even a couple battles in there where I completely destroyed the enemy by just defending for several turns. Pretty fun. That's why I wanted some sort of attacking move on him, because it seemed kind of a waste to not have him have attacking move. This mostly works against bosses, honestly. The only problem is the low damage output he generally has. It's not terribly strong. He's decently strong now because of just me using him a good amount, getting skill cards for him. His magic stat is decent, so he can do some damage. Right. So that's why I have Megidolon on here. You could probably make him more offensive based, but I like having a good setup to start with. Like I talked about before, or with Arakibaka, I used him with a similar method to get him pretty much invincible in Persona 3 and put the auto skills on him so that I would get a buff and just a nice lead-in to start off with bosses or with random battles. And so he's very good for that. One thing I want to highlight here is Repel Physical. If you have Repel, Block, or Absorb Physical on Personas, that is great as a great skill to pass up or pass down. Absorb Physical is exclusive to Mara, but it can be passed down, so just keep that in mind. So you can pass it around if you need to, although Reflect is kind of iffy. For physical skills, you should be fine. Generally, with the general consensus seems to be, and from my own experience as well, Repel Physical is actually below Block Physical, and obviously Absorb Physical, or just any reflecting skill is below the Block and Absorb, just because most things that attack you with like fire are going to be either resistant, block, or going to absorb fire. So you may end up reflecting an enemy attack just for that enemy to heal from that attack. So you may want to just go with block or absorb instead, especially as block tends to be a bit easier to come by. That being said, nothing wrong with a built-in repel, and if that's what you want to go for, like here, that you can absolutely do that. But usually reflect physical is fine, because for most enemies they do not do that. They don't absorb physical attacks. The other thing to note here is Debilitate. Debilitate is Trumpeter's signature move. It's not specific to him, but you do get the skill card for it from him. It decreases attack, defense, and hit rate and evasion, or agility. I'm just going to start calling it agility for the rest of this video. Whatever. It's just easier to say. On one foe, this is pretty good for bosses. He also gets Heat Riser, which I kind of would like on him, which increases attack, defense, and hit and agility on one party member that you select, obviously. Again, you could replace Megidolon with Heat Riser, but like no attacking move on him just seems like a waste. And I've currently got Heat Riser on Nato, another party member, so. Also, you can have it on other personas, so. Moving on to the next one. Actually, the next two. We're going to take on the next two as a group because they're both relatively similar. Next up is Daisoujou. I believe that's how it's pronounced. I might be pronouncing that wrong. Either way, he is up next. Going back to him on the dock, you want to just scroll up real quick. By the way, the dock, if I haven't mentioned, is in level order. So basically, they're in the order of what level you can fuse them at. So Daisoujou, for example, is at level 60, which is behind Trumpeter at level 67. So going over to the Daisoujou that I actually use, this is him currently. His main feature and his signature ability is Samsara. Light, instant kills all foes with no light resistance. This is pretty good. It actually hits fairly often. I'd have to look up the exact hit rate it has, which turned out to be about 60%, depending on whether they're weak to it or resist light attacks, which is actually pretty good. A 60% chance to kill pretty much any persona. There's very few personas that... random personas, I should say. So these next two personas, Daisoujou and the next persona, both kind of work off the same thing, light and darkness, and neither of those really work on bosses. However, you can see how this would be really good for clearing out mobs of enemies, and I'm sure that is being reflected in the B-roll footage I'm showing of me just completely one-shotting like all the enemies in an entire group. Also really important to make sure you have Endure Dark, or like basically covering the weaknesses of any of your personas that are weak to either light or darkness attacks, as those are one-shots. So you will need to make sure to cover those, as that would not be great. And is also another reason to keep Enduring Soul on as many of your personas as possible, especially ones that have a weakness to those kinds of things, as it will restore all HP upon unconscious 1 time per battle. You can also get Endure and rank that up to an Enduring Soul through a magic skill card if you're playing Persona 4 Golden, which I assume you are. By the way, yes, all of this is talking about Persona 4 Golden because that's the game I'm playing, obviously. Some things may differ between Persona 4 and Persona 4 Golden. For example, in Persona 4 Vanilla, there is, like, the original, there is no skill cards, so. He's also got Cool Breeze, which restores 8% of HP and SP after battle. Really good skill to get early on if you're playing Persona 4 Golden right now. If you go to, I believe it is Yatagarasu. Let me look. I believe that is Yatagarasu. Yatagarasu, yeah. I'll pull him up on screen here a sec and show up on screen. But yes, he should give you that Cool Breeze skill card. Otherwise, you can get it from the rank that is being shown on screen show the rank of a sword card from dungeons. And it's a very useful ability to have. It's like an inferior version of Victory Cry, which you can only get from the the ultimate persona in this game, which you can't even get till New Game Plus. But it's still pretty good to have, especially early and mid game when SP management is still a big concern. Trying to get in dungeons in the first day, having an 8% refill on both your HP and SP per battle is really useful, especially since you can just go down to an earlier dungeon, just fight a bunch of easy battles there, and boom, since it's just based on a percentage, you can just do that real quick. So that is very useful. Going back over to Daisoujou. The other skills he has is some buffing skills. I don't think I've finished doing that. This is kind of a work in progress build. I'll probably actually replace Cool Breeze with the last buffing skill. I believe I held off because I wanted to keep Endure Dark on him until I could get something better for it and get the skill card for Endure Dark. Actually, I think that is the best for Darkness, so yeah. I think I was going to replace Cool Breeze with the last buff skills. I just didn't have the skill card for it yet. Yeah, that was what it was. You could also probably replace Amon with something else, as he already has an ability that hits everybody and instantly kills, and he with no layer resistance over a medium chance to kill one foe. Of course, you could consider SP cost, but if you've ranked a Presage Social Link, pretty much, and you have something like Cool Breeze, you don't really need to worry about that, as the amount of SP you'll be regaining is more than you'll be spending usually. If you can take out enemies in 1 or 2 magic attacks, or you have teammates to help, bear that SP cost across the whole party. Up next is Alice. Alice is one of my favorite personas / demons in the SMT Persona series, just because I like Alice in Wonderland and all of its adaptations. I've read a couple of mangas about it. I've watched the live-action movies and actually enjoyed them for whatever that's worth. And I read the original book. I don't know. Something about Alice's in Wonderland is just interesting to me, and how people twist the fantastical nature of it and change the elements of it to create new stories that are still somewhat fantastical. It's an interesting basis for adaptations, I think. Regardless, she's kind of the equivalent of Daisoujou, only for darkness. So if we go over to what she looks like, here we've got Die For Me, which should be playing in the B-roll right now. It is a very cool attack. Again, referencing Alice in Wonderland with the cards. It's an instant kill to all foes with no darkness resist, and I believe it is a 60% hit rate as well. It is basically just the same thing as Samsara, except for darkness. Alice, so this build of Alice, instead of going for buffing skills or debuffing skills, although it would be a kind of cool, like, light and darkness thing to give her debuffing skills, I figured that there was enough room here to give her an amp, a boost, and some sort of magic of a type. That would be a good thing for her, because then she could also get Spellmaster, and she could be my coverage for one of the types that I'm kind of lacking in. For example, I'm currently kind of lacking in ice, coverage, just because I'm not bringing along either Chie in my party too much. Not that she has great magic. Not great. She doesn't have great ice magic coverage, unfortunately. She stops learning spells for that at a certain point, and I'm not really bringing along Teddy, because his walking cycle is kind of annoying, to be honest with you. I don't like hearing squeak, squeak, squeak as I'm moving through a dungeon too much. But that's why she still has Growth 3 on, despite being level 99. She's kind of in that transition state right now. You can see she's got Mabufala on her, just so I can get a Magician card to hopefully boost that up to the next rank at some point here. One important note that it's good to talk about here is wind amp. So all the amp and boost skills, they will stack. So I believe it's amp that gives a 25% boost, and no, it's boost that gives a 25%, and then it's amp that gives a 50%, if I'm remembering correctly the second time. So either way, they stack and they give a good boost to it. So if you're going to make any persona that is dedicated towards one specific type of magic, I would greatly suggest making sure you get both the amp and the boost skill for that element onto that persona. Thankfully, they can be attained through skill cards. I think it is rank 3 for the 25% one and rank 7 or so for the 50% one. If I'm wrong, I'll probably throw that on screen right now. But anyway. But yeah, as you can see in the footage, Die For Me works just as well as Samsara against large groups of enemies, provided they do not resist darkness. And she has a decent magic stat, and you could probably give her a different elemental skill if you'd prefer, or you could go, like I said, with the debuffing thing, and I just thought of that now, so maybe I will end up going with that if I decide to get a specifically ice-based persona, the ultimate ice-based persona, or whatever, instead of putting ice on her. Up next is a persona I'm sure nobody is surprised to see, that everybody and their mothers has heard of, if you've played Persona 4 before, is Yoshitsune. I believe I am saying that right. If I'm saying that wrong, I'm sorry, as it's apparently an actual person. Or at least rumored to be an actual person. It's hard to say with records that old. Regardless, this is one of the most powerful personas in Persona 4, and you would be a fool not to take advantage of him. He can be fused at level 75, and he is not a ultimate social link persona, which honestly he probably should have been for that social link, because oh boy, is he ever good. So let's go ahead and take a look at him. So right off the bat, he nullifies all physical attacks, which is pretty good in this game, as physical attacks were buffed, kind of. Well, so the way it worked is Persona 3 had physical split up to Pierce, Bash, and Strike. Persona 4 merged all these into one, so if you nullify all one, you nullify all of them. So it made having a persona that nullifies everything kind of easier, because it freed up 2 more skills if, for example, you need to cover up 2 more of those resistances. Anyway, that being said, he has the best physical skill in the game, which I'm sure you're seeing in the footage right now, which is Hasatobai, which deals light physical damage to all foes 8 times, which if you're looking at the footage, you'll know is anything but light if you can get him really strong, as he is doing 200 damage, and that is in a dungeon that is very, very late into the game. That these are not pushover enemies, these are not like, oh, I went back and I'm, you know, level 80 or 99 in this case, Pokemon against level 5 Pokemon. No, this is like level 99 against like level 60s, which is kind of a gap, but it's not too much of a gap. And seeing him do 200 damage for 8 times to all enemies, so about 1,600 damage, that's pretty good. And it works against bosses too, as you'll see in the fight at the end of this video. Also on him is Power Charge, which is the skill card you will get from him from Shigal Cafe if you go there, which doubles the damage of next physical attack. I believe it is 2.5 actually. If I'm not incorrect on that, I think it's 2.5 actually, or that it depends on the game, I think. I can't remember if I'm thinking of a different game, but I believe it's actually 2.5. To give you incentive to just use this instead of like spamming a magic steal twice. Anyway. He's also got Arms Master, which has the HP cost for physical skills. I fused this up onto him. You can also get it by fusing him on a certain day, which I cannot remember the specifics of and is rather late in the game. I will flash that date up on screen. Editing me, do that right now. Thank you, future me. You're welcome past me. Oh gosh, I'm in the moment. Okay. So, he also has no dark, no wind, no ice. This covers up all of his, like, things that he didn't already resist or repel or nullify. So the only thing he can be hit with currently is fire, which he is naturally resistant against. This is pretty good. I would like to get Victor Cry on him. Unfortunately, I cannot do that until New Game Plus, so I'm stuck with Apt Pupil, as there's not a lot else I can do to... I can't find anything else really better to put on him to help boost his physical attack, but Apt Pupil is pretty good. So it increases his critical hit rate, so hopefully get a crit on the Asatobo. And I'm just going to let the footage roll. I have one fight in particular that I want to show you. This is a fight against a rather bulky enemy in that dungeon, and it's combining the powers of both Trumpeter and Yoshitsune, trying to give you an idea of like how much damage Yoshitsune can actually put out. So I'm just gonna let that footage play out, and I'll meet you on the other side for the next persona.
Oh, that's not good. Darkness won't work.
Persona!
Three of them. Don't give up now, okay? All right, we won. We did it.
Next up is the man, the myth, the demon, Satan himself. Which, interesting note here, in Persona 3, you'll notice that on that he has no nips. In Persona 4, they put back in the nips. Okay. It's just a discrepancy between the model and the artwork because this is the Persona 3 model. You'll never be able to unsee it, because I have to know about this, so now you have to live with it, and we all just have to live in this place together now. Anyway, going over to the actual persona, the actual Satan I'm using, we have Black Viper, which is why I originally fused him, which deals massive almighty damage to one foe. This is good for bosses and everything. Or at least that's what I would say. Testing him out in this environment made me realize he's not as good as I was hoping. And it's not like his magic stat is bad or anything. His magic stat is decent, but as you will see in the footage of me testing him in heaven, maybe that's why he wasn't up to his full strength there, but he just couldn't really hack it. He's okay. The Black Viper is fine. I'm thinking of bringing on Hallel instead, as he is a all-hit version of Black Viper, which does massive almighty damage to all foes. But I'm thinking of bringing him on board instead of Satan. He's cool looking though, and if you'd like to make a version of him that is null to wind and repels physical and all that. Again, I was gonna put like a different kind of magic on him to cover up weaknesses. Probably wind. I think I was gonna go for wind because that was funny because he was weak to wind, and then he's gonna put out massive damage in wind type. But after seeing his damage with Black Viper tested so much for the B-roll footage, I'm not as into him as I was before. And I think I'd rather have the room for other personas. Again, if I make more personas either during this playthrough or later on in playthroughs, I will be putting their recipes into the doc. One thing I'd like to highlight, since we're going over Satan pretty quickly here, is in the doc itself, So if you've been following along, you'll have noticed that in the doc, it talks a lot about like what level the learn the abilities at, and where you can get the skill cards for these things. I would like to say that you should probably always be fusing these skills up if you can. I because especially with stuff like Spellmaster, Shiva is a max social link persona, so being able to like fuse up this card or this ability rather than trying to get the card from Shiva or getting lucky with the rank 9's sword cards. Like you can get lucky with the rank 9 sword cards, but like it's going to take a while and you might not get it, and it's all RNG and it can get frustrating pretty quickly, especially when you are trying to get like a specific rank of card, and then out of that entire pool of whatever abilities that could be, you get the one you've already gotten before or something. It's kind of frustrating. Anyway, that being said, we're gonna actually skip over the next one in the doc just because I cannot make him at the time of this recording where I'm at in the game, and also he's kind of a spoiler. It's hard to talk about him because he is heavily related to one of the final bosses of the game, and it's just hard to talk about him without spoiling things. And it's one of the biggest secrets and like one of the most things that people would be best not knowing going into Persona 4. So I will leave it at that, and we're just gonna skip over him. He's also not too great. Without talking in specifics, his all kill move requires setup of having enemies fear him with, Ghastly Wail, and you have Samsara and Die For Me, which can do roughly the same thing without setup, as long as they aren't resisted, which isn't most enemies. Again, you can set up Fear and Ghastly Wail on any enemy that is not a boss, pretty much, but it does require some setup, and I'd rather just use Alice or Daisoujou. I'll probably still make him because how cool he looks, but I might have to rework his original design and like skill set, so to make him more usable. That being said, let's move on to the next persona. This is a persona that I cannot say the name of because even more than the last one, I might get this video flagged as something that it's not. This is another one that I'm kind of iffy about right now, and I've been thinking about getting rid of. Some of that you'll see in the footage. The thing about this particular persona is A, it's annoying not being able to say her name all the time so the video doesn't get flagged, and B, she's alright, but she's not great. I was hoping she was gonna look like her Persona 3 counterpart, to be honest, because it was cool that we could get a party member's persona from Persona 3, but she doesn't look like that persona, so it's kind of eh. She's alright. She's basically the healer, Salvation, Samikaram, Spellmaster. I also put the barrier spells on her, Makarakarn and Tetrakarn, which reflect either physical or magic damage once, which can be useful. It just was kind of a neat thing to have on her, and it fills up 2 slots. It's not a huge thing. Again, I'm kind of iffy on her. I might end up replacing her for a different, cooler-looking healer, or one from a different maxed-out social link. For example, Marie's or Margaret's. No, wait, this is Margaret's, so yeah, maybe from Marie's or something. So, we'll see. Last but not least is Futsunushi, which I mentioned earlier, from Futsunushi. Yeah, okay, I think that's what... I think that's how you pronounce it. So he's a sword deity. Oh, cool. He is a pretty good persona for one reason in particular. Again, this comes back to signature abilities and what you should be looking at when you're looking at which personas you want to use and like keep in your party and late game. So he has the unique ability of Ali Dance. The hit rate of an attacking unit is reduced by half. Now, usually this is used in tandem with a ability called Firm Stance. Firm Stance makes it so that enemies always hit you, but you take half the damage. Which is a reasonable trade-off, I guess. The thing is, it doesn't affect their hit rate, but this does, meaning it halves their hit rate. So you have no agility with Firm Stance, but the enemy has a less likely chance of hitting you with Ali Dance. However, I have opted to replace Firm Stance with Angelic Grace instead from that skill card that I got earlier that I talked about with Izanagi. This doubles your evasion rate against like all attacks except for Light, Darkness, and Almighty. Meaning that if I'll put up the math on screen right now, it comes out to about the same if you say you're going to get hit for 100 damage and you have a 50% chance to dodge it, and you have 50% chance to not get hit by the enemy, then it comes out to 25 damage, like if you were to roll the dice 4 times, or approximately so. And if you had a half chance to take half damage, it would be 25 damage. The thing is, with the first one, you don't get hit at all, so no secondary effects can occur. That's why I chose to go with Angelic Grace and Ali Dance over Ali Dance and Firm Stance. However, if you can't get Angelic Grace, Ali Dance and Firm Stance are still pretty good as a combo. However, you cannot have Angelic Grace and Firm Stance at the same time, as Firm Stance will cancel out Angelic Grace entirely. Also on him is Arms Master to reduce the price of his Primal Force, which is the highest single target attacking physical move in the game. It's not specific to him, but he does get it. So the real use of this this persona is just to dodge attacks and power charge for other personas. Mostly, Yoshitsune. Oh, sorry, I'm bad with names. Anyway, mostly just for that. Other than that, I've nullified his one darkness weakness, and he nullifies physical attacks. He can do some damage, but more often than not, I usually change over to Yoshitsune to actually do real damage. Although I did have one battle that went amazingly well, where he got great criticals, and even though he has Apt Pupil now, that was not the case during that battle, which I'm probably showing now. He has only growth 3 there instead. It wasn't until after this battle that I put Apt Pupil on him, because I was like, well, there must be something behind that crit rate. And in fact, if I go ahead and look up Primal Force from the doc, I'm just going to click this handy dandy link that's on the doc. That brings me right to the effect. And it's got a 25% chance to crit, so not too terrible. It does cost quite a bit of HP, as it's 1/5 of your HP at 20%. Although if you do have Arms Master, it does get cut down to 10%, so makes it a lot more usable. Other than that, so that was the final persona that I wanted to go over real quick. At this point, I think probably a lot of people have gotten off. If you've gotten to this point, please leave me any comments or any questions you have for me. Maybe if you have a particular persona that you would like to see me use, maybe put in the comments down below if you'd like to see we'll build for it. Any tips or tricks you'd like to leave for anybody in the comments down below, that would be great too. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you a 1v1 battle with the Reaper, which is a rather, it's a challenging enough optional boss that you can encounter, and it's going to be a 1v1, so it's going to be harder than it was intended to be, and it was actually a fairly good showcase of some of these personas and their uses and how they fare up against a boss. And it was a really fun battle actually. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that, watching that, and I will be commentating over it slightly. So otherwise, if you are going to not watch my exploits and see how these things actually work in battle against an actual hard boss, then I will hopefully see you in the next video. On with the Reaper. You Alright. Taking deeper off myself. But this is actually, like I said, a difficult challenge. More than I expected, but it was a nice challenge and showed off a lot of tons. Starting off, we've got Trumpeter, Debilitate, Reaper, Mind Charging, preparing to attack me with fire, it seems, as you nullified my resistance to it. The Trumpeter immune to fire and everything, so he can still be
Persona!
a enemy beats defense. Charge. Notice there that his debuffs wear so because the bird gets 2 turns for every one turn you, he has his debuff that much. It's hard to keep a debuff up on him, especially so when you're so this like this. So you'll see that I'll try to debuff as we can, and with Trumpa is going to be a bit of a struggle throughout this fight. You can see that innovation rate really buffed with the Nushi bow doing good work.
Persona!
Get debuffs. And like I said before, refer physical damage. Pretty good situations.
Persona!
Charging. I believe use Yoshitsune. Dune. Again, really important to block any says he sees the weakness to darkness on Futsunushi. He cannot hit because I have blocked darkness attacks on Futsunushi, so it's important to cover those kind of personas you're using because they are one big hit. Again.
Persona!
Yep. You'll see reset a lot during this as well. It was very useful when you have party members. Got the Yoshitsune here. Much damage does.
Persona!
Ooh, that was a nice hefty 3 for 8 hits. 1,400 nice. Good chunk off damage. His agents right there. And here drain is an all attack, so even the almighty Trumpeter or almighty Yoshitsune anything against for random great so much great player he is barely anything lucky. It's a little later. Here I go to show Izanagi just to see if he can do damage. Honestly, this was just kind of a flex part. He does a good chunk of the 400 up there, but honestly, it's probably not the best. And he does get into less critical and just get kind of hair for a little bit from bit on.
Persona!
And there goes his time down 4. And at this point his health is low enough that he starting pull up. So this is become a problem as he will ignore the level 60 slower personas there. They're just random I picked up while I was E-footed a couple times. Here pick myself up. See coming in with my Dave. Reflect physical again. Physical absorb block health. We're really ton of 4. Really good.
Persona!
Why this was deflected on oh no wait, it was here. Yeah, He started making Megiddo, and he'll do that every single turn from now on because he's free range. I'm not sure why that neither of those Megidolans were reflected, given that I choose Dr. Karn to the next attack, and Ari says it's effect, though I guess I just did not reflect all Megidolans, unfortunately. Good. Something here. So this pouch will last for a little while here. As power charge does not go away, and same with mind charge, you use the corresponding attack. Power charge will not go away if you use physical attack, and if you charge go away until you use the magic attack. So, good thing to keep in mind. So here I know my health getting low. Okay, I'll just switch. Trumpeter and Diva next turn and just heat. I'm a very hoardy person. You'll see 99 place turns there. When it comes items, but you know, I was willing to go ahead and do that. Which is why I'm still so I'm trying to figure what I have the most of. Use here. That was actually I never looked at what the beast do. I was like, oh, those SPS, so I'll just use a beat. Unfortunately, I kind of get stuck a little bit because he is going to continue spamming Megiddo. Judge going to have to do 200 for damage or so each time, which is 4 damage, and max is under. So he's getting about 2/3 of my turns don't heal. Kill me next turn. Unless I am enduring something, but
Persona!
kind of locked for us here. Just like you'll see here again. Which would kind of move honestly. I was and because I hadn't really looked at the edges of hitting. Unfortunately, this is my fault. And I was like, I don't know, praying for like less damage. Dodge. I did dodge there, but at this point I realized I've changed Nushi, Futsunushi or whatever, because dodge chance just heal up that way. So this way. I heal up. I have a chance of actually ducking his attacks. Keep in mind this is active here. Angelic can't help against Almighty. Still seeing great effects there. Especially Eidolon is an all target. So it has slightly less hit rate. A single target. It's not too significant. Persona 4, which was another from Persona 3, where all hit makes attack much lower. Finally get this cycle here. Too much. I'm like, okay, let's finish this off. I know he's within Yoshitsune Toboy range. I just switch over. Go for the kill. And that is the Reaper I want. The personas that I have. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it has given you sight on for good personas that you can sadly did not Almighty or I hope that you have a great day and in case see ya. Good night. See ya.